Well, Larry Hughes is going to pop out and get the ball. Jordan's going to rub his man off of Leitner and then cut down the center and gets a nice pass from Larry Hughes.
Long rebound, Hughes. Fake, jumper is good.
Give it to me, Larry. Give it to me, Larry Hughes.
Hello, folks. Welcome to this week's edition of the Bleav in Wizards podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Modderno, and I'm joined by my co-host, Larry Hughes. Larry, what's up?
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Same old, same old. I think at some point here we're going to get tired of doing this this non-basketball intro, but it'll be good to have some things to talk about. But I think we got some good topics lined up for today and try to give people some good insights as always.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, we're going to be joined here in a couple minutes by a rising American tennis star, Frances Tiafoe. He's currently number 81 on the ATP Tour. He's been a career high number 29 as recently as the last year. Frances is only 22 years old. He's played matches against Roger Federer, Rafael, Nadal, giving them all that they can handle. So this is a name you're going to be hearing a lot over the next couple of years, not just if you're a tennis fan, but overall. He's got a great story, and he is a DMV native and a Wizards fan. So we want to show him a little love and talk a little bit about the overlap between the two sports. Frances, how's it going?
Things are well. I mean, I'm just at a massive hold right now and ready to hopefully get it going soon.
Are you down in Florida at the USTA facility, or where are you holed up these days?
I'm actually based here. I'm actually based here in DC. I mean, I live at the Wharf and train out in Maryland. So yeah.
First off, man, I know you're itching and scratching to get back out there and do what you do, man, and praying for this situation to pass and we can all get back to normal life and do what we do, man. But just got a few questions for you. Some of them have to do with the Wizards. Obviously, you're in DC. But just as a former player, I'd like to know who your favorite current player is.
On the Wizards.
On the Wizards.
I mean, you gotta say real deal Bill. I mean, the guy's
okay.
I mean, he's gotten completely screwed not getting an All-Star. I mean, he's a walking bucket. He can do anything he wants with the rock. I mean, he's got a wet jumper. He can come to the lane. I love his handle. He's really impressed me this season, and the fact that he didn't get All-Star, that one hurt me too.
I mean, he didn't get All-Star, but he may win one of the All-NBA teams, so that may be a little bit of console for him.
Right.
There's a little longer-term money connected with that All-NBA team too when he goes for that next contract.
Exactly.
So, Frances, obviously you grew up in the DC area. You're a big NBA fan overall. Like, how big into the Wizards are you overall? Like, are you a diehard crazy fan, or what's the deal?
I'm a pretty serious fan. I mean, I've definitely followed all the games. You know, I'm really into it. When I'm home, I go to almost every game. I'm really close to Ted. I mean, I'm definitely invested in my Wizards, and I definitely want John Wall to get back. I mean, I like our crew. I like our squad. And hopefully we can have some success in the future.
I just want to know, since you're watching a lot of basketball, which player, whether it be a Wizards player or just someone in the NBA, that you would say your game mirrors them on the basketball court? Which player do you feel has the mentality that you have? They have it in the basketball space.
When I'm in my best moments, I gotta say Giannis. I mean, I'm a killer. I don't care who I'm playing against. Though Fred, like I just want to dub. I want to go eat. So, and seeing what he does every night with the Bucks, that kid's a killer. Obviously, you can put Westbrook in there and guys like that, but a guy who just constantly getting wins, that dude's special, man.
Frances, you mentioned like in the Wizard squad and some of the young guys and stuff like that. What do you think of Rui Hachimura so far?
I love me some Rui. I think he's definitely a baller. I was pretty impressed with him. I wouldn't know what to expect. Obviously, would he go 8th or 9th in the overall? So, yeah, I mean, obviously coming from that guy, I thought he had a pretty good season. Obviously, he was out for a little bit there, but, I like him. I mean, you think about you put John back in there with Brad, how he's playing. Rui, obviously you have Thomas Bryant. And, I mean, if even with Short Brown Jr., I mean, I think it's a decent squad. I mean, especially in the East to get at least 4 or 5 and get your teeth in the playoffs. I mean, I really like our squad, fully healthy.
So what have you been doing to stay in shape and stay fit? Are you able to train? Are you able to work with a trainer? Are you able to work with teammates? What have you been doing to stay sharp?
Exactly. I've had I was working with my family members, my brother, my girlfriend, and stuff like that with my fitness coach at a little private gym that I was able to get access to for about a week, 10 days, and then they put us on lockdown, obviously. So yeah, I mean now I mean I've the garage in my apartment building, there's massive space, and I've been doing agility work, sprints, and skip rope and things like that to kind of do something there in the day. Yeah, it's been crazy, man.
So as a guy that's been through 2 lockouts, I'm gonna give you advice. Stay ready. Stay ready, so you don't have to get ready. I've been to two work stoppages. This is a life stoppage, but just stay ready, man. Just stay ready. Push yourself to the limit.
Yeah, 100%. That's kind of my mindset, because I want to get back and be as fit as ever, and just be ready to just go full throttle as soon as I step back out.
Francis, you obviously play the tennis season is an 11.5-month season, basically.
Stupid.
The wear and tear you guys got to put on is probably as much as any sport. Has this been kind of good for you to be able to take a little bit of a health break and rest up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had a bit of a ranking drop, so I was actually hungry to kind of play any Wells in Miami and get those big events and hopefully go for some big rounds to get my ranking back to where it was, obviously, like the 20s. But yeah, now I got time to reflect and kind of sit back and just know what I got to do when I get back out. And I'm excited for it. Hopefully, this thing cools out. I mean, I'm just obviously more excited that my family ultimately doesn't have it.
Were you out in Palm Springs when you got news about the season shutting down?
Right. So we're all there sitting ready to go. All the players are there, and then they're like, all right, it's canceled. And we're all sitting there like, all right. So what's our next move? Everyone's talking about Miami. And then they said, all right, yeah, we're out of job for 6 weeks. So everyone evacuates. And then they said, all right, cool, we're going to come back to June. Then they said, all right, cool. Now Wimbledon gets canceled. All right, now we won't see you guys till July. So we're like, all right, fuck. Now we actually feel like it's the NBA offseason break.
Yeah, that's tough, man. We're praying that we all can get back to some sort of normal life, let you guys get back to doing what you love to do. Again, man, make sure you stay right. Stay in a good headspace.
100%, man. 100%. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the plan. So where you guys at?
I'm in St. Louis. So you talk about Brad Beal. I'm born and raised. Yeah, man. I'm born and raised in St. Louis and from St. Louis. So I'm glad you picked Brad, because he's a hometown guy.
That's the thing. He must be big over there. I mean, him and Jason Tatum, huh?
There you go. Yep, there you go.
I mean,
you got a little basketball history. I like it.
I'm telling you, man. I love hoops, man. I'm all over it. But yeah, man, Tatum also popped off this year. I actually thought he played better after the All-Star break than he did even before an All-Star.
Yeah, that's just that hard work and dedication.
Oh, that dude's mean, man. That dude's special.
That's what the kind of jump we're looking for from you once you get back into the 20s here, Francis. That's
100%. 100%. I'm about to get back and make some noise like I was in the past.
There's another famous basketball fan on the ATP tour. Nick Kyrgios is obviously, Yeah,
a lot of NBA guys follow him and stuff. I mean, that's all me and him talk about. I mean, we talk about hoops. We both got a ton of jerseys. We talk about hoops nonstop. I mean, he definitely loves it. I mean, obviously, every time you see him, he's NBA League Pass. He's watching games. He absolutely loves it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great, man. I think basketball is a great sport. Yeah, I mean, when he was in Palm Springs, he went to go see the Bucks and the Lakers showdown.
He's a Celtics fan, right, for the most part?
Yeah, he's a Celtics fan. I remember when the Wiz lost to them in 16-17 season. Man, that hurt. And me and him were just going back and forth. Fucking Kelly Olynyk going for 34. That's bullshit. But yeah, I mean, he's a big Celtics fan, and I'm a big Washington fan. It seems like that little rivalry is pretty special. I mean, it seems like both teams usually bring it when we play against each other.
I try to remain professional because I'm around a good amount of these guys in the locker room and stuff like that. But when I saw Kelly Olynyk at Summer League this year, he was sitting down a couple rows in front of me. And I had to resist the urge to talk a little trash there. That one gutted me too as a Wizards fan.
That gutted me. I mean, Kelly Olynyk, out of all guys, Kelly Olynyk, I have nothing against him. He's a little hooper, but I mean, Canadian dude, just long ponytail, doesn't even look like a baller. He just goes and drops 34 on me. Come on, man.
Any other guys on the ATP tour that would surprise us to know are NBA fans too?
There's one guy who's been injured for a really long time. Tanasi Kokonaka is also an Australian guy. He's actually close to CP3. He's a big fan, NBA fan. There's guys who try to bluff and act like they know what they're talking about. There's a lot of guys like that. But as far as like guys who are in it, I would just say honestly me and Nick.
I know Isner played a little hoops growing up, being a big guy.
Isner loves it. Riley Opoka loves it. Tommy Paul loves it. The American guys all are pretty much obsessed with it. Sam Querrey and things like that. Gael Monfils is actually really good at basketball too.
He's an athlete.
Loves it because obviously there's a bunch of French guys with Tony Parker, obviously Rudy Gobert, things like that. Yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount. Jack Austin also.
If you weren't doing your thing on a tennis court, what other sports you think you could compete at a professional level?
Man, I was one of those dudes. Obviously, I played hoops and stuff as a joke when I was younger, but man, I was one of those dudes I saw tennis as definitely an opportunity for me and my family to get out of the situation where we're in and put everybody in a better situation. So I was locked in tennis, man. That's all I did. That's all I cared about when I was a youngin. Obviously now, I'm in a good place. I, follow the sports and my eye catches other things. But back then, I was lasered in and this is who I am. This is what I'm going to be. So yeah, I only really played tennis primarily growing up.
I know you guys, your pops was working at a training facility.
Right.
Do you feel like that was an advantage to you as far as your development, early on, just having access to grounds to train?
100%. I mean, the only thing that was at a tennis court longer than me was like the net post. I mean, I was at the court all day. I cherished it. I loved it. I still do. Even right now, I'm missing it a lot. That's the only thing I wanted to do, and I was able to get a lot of access time, and even hear the coaches. When they're coaching other people, seeing what they're doing, I would go try it on my own when they wouldn't let me go in the full-time program or the after-school program when I was real young. Kind of just picking dudes' brains, asking questions, and just kind of just being a sponge.
Do you still keep in touch with a lot of the JTCC guys?
Yeah, coaching stuff. Yeah, I mean, even the players that grew up with me, they're my best friends now. Obviously, them seeing me on the tour, they were following me or just like cheering me on. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, and those relationships you kind of keep forever. And those things, those relationships where Frances Tiafoe wasn't a name. You kind of cherish those. Not one of those guys kind of latch on that.
So one of the big highlights in the way you burst onto the scene was a U.S. Open match against Roger Federer, where you guys had a long 5-setter. What's it like to play a guy like that and compete at that level and show everybody that you can hang with the best in the business?
Yeah, man, that was special, man. That was definitely special. It reminded me of that at first Iris and MJ. It was kind of like, yo, man, like I'm here and I'm about to show the whole world like it's not just a name. I'm here to make some noise tonight. And it was funny because I went into that match. I was like, man, I'm not here to have a good match. I'm here to beat this guy. And obviously, I almost did. So yeah, there was a lot of hype after that, and to do that there in New York, I always told my family I'm going to play Roger Federer on that court one day, and to have that happen was pretty special.
What's the one goal that that you set that trumps every other goal that you have in place thus far? What's that one goal that's on the top of your board that you're chasing every day?
Well, other than obviously being great and trying to win Grand Slams and things like that, I mean, my personal massive goal is to leave. I mean, a massive legacy is to have people of color not only want to play the game of tennis, but to be great in whatever field they're in, to be inspired of what Frances Tiafoe did. I mean, kind of like what happened to Kobe, seeing how it affected everybody, no matter what you did. If you were a doctor, lawyer, if you bagging groceries, like that hurts you. You know what I'm saying? Like that's part of you was gutted just because everybody knew what he gave to the sport. Everybody knew what he gave to other people, and give people a chance to be somebody like that. That's what it's all about.
Chasing greatness, man. Keep going.
Exactly.
So Larry obviously competed with and against the two guys that most people consider the GOAT on the basketball side in Michael Jordan and LeBron James. So 2-part question for you, Frances. You've also competed against two of the people in consideration for tennis GOAT in Roger Federer and Nadal. On the basketball side, who would you take? And on the tennis side, who would you take?
Bro, you putting me here? Look, man, I mean, bronze obviously my time, right? Bronze obviously my time. But, I mean, 6-0, I mean, dude, like, what we talking about? Like, 6-0, like, I got to say MJ. Like, I mean, you see this, like, 6-0, what we talking about, bro? I mean, this dude's like, MJ with the flu? Bro, come on, man. Dude's best game, they can't even play MJ with the flu game. So I'm going to go MJ, man. And then as far as, Roger and Rafa, I mean, they're tight right now with 20 slams and 19 slams. But, I mean, playing both of them, I'm going to have to say Roger. I'm a Roger fan. I like how easy the game comes to him, everything he's done for the sport. I mean, his legacy is going to live for years and years. I mean, he's forever. Even if these guys pass him, Roger's that dude, man.
I'm with you on both.
Yeah. Who you got for the GOAT, Larry, on the basketball court?
Oh, if basketball players, it's MJ. MJ, he's done it all. He's the guy that I look to, on and off the court. Obviously played with Bron, and how I always say it is, if you look at the Jordan man, you look at the Jordan symbol. You got MJ there, you got Bron just hanging on to that shoe. Right, that's how close he is. He's just hanging on to that shoe. He's not going anywhere. He's there for life. That's how I see it.
Trust. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Frances, thanks for taking a couple minutes with us. We really appreciate it. We're a DMV sports-focused podcast here. Obviously primarily basketball, but we love showing a little love and support for for you as well. So appreciate you taking the time. Keep us posted, and hopefully you can get back out on the court here soon.
Thanks, man. Y'all take care.
Man, keep going, young fella.
Yeah, thanks, man. You too.
All right, folks, that was our interview with Frances Tiafoe. Hopefully you enjoyed that one. Obviously, Larry and I are going to focus mostly on basketball, but while we got a little free time here, we wanted to give you a little different taste and bring in another sports star just to kind of get a different feel for, what it's like being a pro athlete in another sport as well. Larry, anything major that you took away from that interview about the overlap of the two sports?
Just basketball and sports travel. Just because you play one major sport, that doesn't mean that you're not a fan of the other major sports, and you have your favorite players, you have your favorite games, you have your favorite jerseys. So we're all in this thing together, man. It's good to see the different sports, have conversations and they all overlap.
It's probably hard to be a fan of your own sport when you're living it and on the tour and have to battle those guys. So it's probably helpful to have another outlet and something else you can watch too. Recently, the Ringer podcast network, specifically the Bill Simmons podcasts, and they've been doing them on their Book of Basketball channel too, have been redrafting drafts, starting in the mid to late 90s. And they very recently did the 1998 draft that was your draft class and did a redraft of the top 15 picks only. So you went 8th in that draft originally. So I'm going to read you off the list here of their redraft, and I want to get your thoughts on this, and we can go through it in as much detail as we want here.
Gotcha.
The first thought is you were in a pretty stacked draft class here. You don't see things like this too typically today. So the first pick in their redraft was Dirk Nowitzki. Kind of hard to argue with a first ballot Hall of Famer going there. That seems legitimate. So the first 5 here, I think, are pretty fair. So Paul Pierce went 2, Vince Carter 3, Rashard Lewis went 4. You could maybe start to pick at that one a little bit. Former Wizard Antoine Jameson went 5th. So personally, I would have had Jameson ahead of Lewis, but you played against both those guys. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think, that's pretty consistent with how the draft actually went for Twan. So I think he's probably a little bit ahead of Rashard again, but Rashard got a championship. So
yeah, that definitely gives everybody a little leg up, I would think.
Oh yeah.
So 6th, they had Mike Bibby, and this is where it started to got a little hazy for me, I think. So Jason Williams, White Chocolate Jason Williams, went after Bibby. Katino Mobley, Rafe LaFrentz, Al Harrington, Rafer Alston, and then Larry Hughes at number 12. What do you think about those couple names right in front of you, Larry? I don't want to put you too much on the spot. You don't have to trash anybody.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't agree with that. I don't know what the fan pool was as far as piecing out that draft class, but some good talent, man. We all get a chance to compete and be in the league, man. That's really a blessing in itself. And at that point, for me, it's like wherever I went in the draft, in '98 was good. So I can look back and say, I'll stick with number 8. I'll keep it. I'll stick with number 8.
I think, if anywhere outside the top 5 is, top 5 is pretty tough list to be in. That's great company. Your best couple seasons in the league, though, are as good as most of those guys in that top 5. So that's probably where I would have assumed that you would go in a list like that too. Obviously, I think people sleep on people like like a Rafe LaFrentz. Like his best couple of years in the league were pretty good too, but obviously didn't have the longevity and had some injuries and stuff. And for Wizards fans, you kind of remember Al Harrington by the time he got to Washington, and he was on the tail end of things. But he could bring it in the Pacers days too.
Oh yeah. Al's a good friend of mine. A good friend of mine, a guy that came out of high school. So I think that's testament to his work ethic to have a draft, years and years later. I'm saying that he goes in the top of the ranks, especially for Rashard. Rashard was in the green room, when everybody was gone. So for him to turn his career around and then, have this little redraft situation and have them, noticed as one of those good players in that draft I think that's solid.
And he was another guy that only spent a limited amount of time in Washington, but everybody talked fondly about from a character standpoint. And I think part of the reason that they brought him in the trade for Gilbert Arenas was because they knew they wouldn't have any locker room issues or anything like that. So yeah, for sure, good to see a guy like that get a little love after the fact. But to your point, I think he went like 32 originally or something like that.
No, yeah, man, that was rough. That was rough to see him, hanging around the green room and obviously knowing that he had talent or he wouldn't be there. Just, once you get to that draft room, like you really had zero control. I mean, everybody on the outside can have their thoughts and their comments, but so once you're back into that room, it's like it's just a waiting game.
I think he's one of the reasons that the NBA is like really tried to focus in on if somebody's invited to the green room, like we better be damn sure that they're going, somewhere around the lottery. And saw the other year with Bol as one of the few people it's kind of really dropped based on where they were projected. But for the most part, they seem to have kind of tried to avoid situations like that again, especially for a young guy too. It's even tougher when you're 18 compared to 22.
Yeah, that's a very good point. These kids are getting younger, so I mean, the self-esteem and all that stuff that goes along with just that age, making sure those guys are solid going in.
So speaking of some draft-related stuff, just because I'm like desperate for basketball-related things to watch, I've been going through some of the, pre-draft player profiles, and one of the names that seems to have resonated with the fan base here is Onyeka Okongwu out of USC. He's a freshman this year, and Mike Schmitz of ESPN talked to him, and they went through some film and stuff like that. And it was interesting watching a couple of these draft profiles in a row with the actual prospect, because they basically asked like the same 10 questions, but of pretty much any post player that had like good hands and could corral the ball, they asked them, did they play football? Were they a tight end or anything like that? And, they asked Okongwu, look at that catch. Were you a football player? And he said no. And they were like, are you sure? It's like, I think he would be reasonably sure if he played football or not. But you do see a lot of, transferable skills between different sports and some cross training. Did you play other sports growing up, or was it kind of strictly basketball?
Well, it was strictly organized basketball, but playing in the schoolyard, pick up, play court, play kill a man, football, every man for himself. We tumbled, found old mattresses that people had thrown out with the good box springs in them. So we did those kind of deals and, hopping gates. So those kind of exercises that these kids nowadays, they get them in a controlled environment. So they're going from sport to sport. But for me growing up, I was able to figure out how to juke and move, or also how to do flip notes and do those type of things. So just growing up really and being out in the space, really helped me get my skills together.
Nobody had a parachute strapped to you as you ran, suicides at age 12 or anything like that.
Not then, man. We were probably, running from stray dogs and just creating some conflict so we can take off and run and see who gets there first. Those sort of games that we played to get our skills up.
Yeah, it's definitely a different world now, and people are starting to prep for the draft and higher level basketball earlier on. And I've actually kind of asked you this a little bit off record before we started going here, but did you have any thoughts coming out of high school about declaring for the NBA so quickly, or only needing a year of college to get ready for that?
No, you know what? I really didn't know what I needed. I knew I had a joy of the game. I knew I was getting better, but I didn't necessarily have a goal to reach the NBA. So I was just kind of going through the motions. I was trying to stay out of trouble. I was trying to find a way to be successful, not knowing if basketball or playing basketball would be that vehicle. But I really didn't have dreams of going to the NBA. So really playing my freshman year in college, I was just more of sourcing information and people approaching us about what sort of opportunities would be out there, what sort of things that are available to us, be it a draft or be talking with agents or evaluating, the evaluation process. Like I was completely blind to that. I didn't know anything about that. So really for me, it was an opportunity for someone to find me. It was really a blessing because I wasn't out looking for it. Like right now, I think kids, they go out to look for it because it's there, it's visible. But for me, I didn't have that. I didn't have that in front of me. So just the opportunity for somebody to come and say they saw something in me, that I had the ability to play with professionals and play with grown men and play at the highest level of basketball. Then my eyes got open to, the opportunities that were out there and started figuring out, okay, is this the right time? Okay, there's a draft coming up. Where are the teams placed? Where are certain places that I would like to go? So I'm from the Midwest. So I'm looking at, okay, this is like a visit trip or like a vacation type deal where I can go and explore and have the ability to get out of my environment and go play some basketball.
Not that you went under the radar or anything like that, but, guys now, by the time they're 12 years old, people are like, oh, this guy's a 5-star, eventual high D1 kind of thing. It's got to be just different for those kids trying to manage that from a young age and the expectations that get heaped on them early.
Yeah. I mean, I won all of that stuff, right? I mean, I won all of scored the most points in high school and McDonald's All-American and everything that you could win, what I'm saying, leading up to going to college and trying to be successful and trying to transfer that that ability into college. So I felt like my accolades and things were there, but my eyes just weren't open to what that stuff really meant. Like I just wanted to be better than the person that was standing across from me. That's it. Like that is completely it. Okay, we're talking about who's going to win, who's going to be number one. That's really what I'm shooting for, not to be number one to gain this or gain that. It was just really to be number one so I can beat that person that was across from me.
Yeah, it probably helped from a mental, standpoint too, to be kind of focused on just exactly what you can control and not who's ranking had you ahead of which guy and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just a lot going on for me during that time. My brother was dealing with an illness, and that was really my focus. I played basketball because I was good at it, and he got some joy from me playing basketball. I mean, really. So I played until I couldn't play anymore, or till he couldn't watch me anymore. But that was really, it kept me in line and kept my focus in the right place. So I didn't worry about what other people were saying because I knew that my family was getting the joy out of seeing me play. And for me, that was really all that mattered.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that kind of brings up an interesting point of, obviously you went 8th, so it was the right choice and
Yeah.
that worked and you got to help your family and set them up well. But do you think another year of college in retrospect would have done anything for you at that point? Like, was it better to get to the NBA and get professional level coaching and experience, or would another year of seasoning, I guess, in college have helped you long term?
I think going that high, it was the right decision because again, then I was able to really focus on my game, really focus on being a professional, really get with the best people in the game, whether it be strength and conditioning guys, whether it be medical staffs, whether it be just just information that coaches can download to you. So I think for me, it was the best decision. And also, I probably could have went 7th to Sacramento. It just wasn't a place that I was necessarily interested in going. Mm-hmm. So I kind of did a few things that made sure that I wouldn't go to Sacramento. So it was a good decision for me, man. I could have went anywhere from I think it was 6 to 8. And I ended up going 8, which dropped into a great place in Philadelphia. Good connection, good coach. Met one of my good friends today. So I think it was definitely the right decision.
And I think Philly wasn't necessarily one of those kind of typical lottery teams where, they needed like a long rebuild. They obviously had a star there and in place. And, Sacramento at that time, it was probably a slightly different story and, might have been a longer road as they tried to rebuild. Obviously, they got good a couple years later, but at that point in that development, that was probably a good call.
Yeah, you just never know, right? Sacramento, they did get good a couple years after that, but Philadelphia also did the same. Mm-hmm. But by that time, I had transitioned out to Golden State, and we were terrible. So it's just all about, just timing and experiences and, just keeping one foot in front of the other because it really is. I mean, you're only going to be successful as the teams that you play on. I mean, it's not always based on, the talent of that individual. So being dropped in the right situation at the right time, at the right place, with the right people around you, with the right vision, I mean, that plays a huge part in the longevity of players and organizations and, how teams are able to win.
All right. So you alluded to this. I gotta pick here that's my job on the show. There's got to be a little bit of a story there. You mentioned doing some things on the Sacramento. Maybe is it the interview? Like maybe not giving your best interview or not sending them medicals. Like what do you got?
It was just the workout. It was the workout. I went to Golden State before I went to Sacramento. I got a little bit banged up in Golden State. I think it was a little tweak my ankle or sprained ankle or something like that. But it was all about the workout. Like I didn't give what I knew I had, in the workout. So I didn't sabotage any sort of interviews or anything like that. But did I go full speed in the workout? Nah, I didn't. I can admit that.
You always hear the story kind of after the fact about Kobe Bryant saying like if certain teams had drafted him earlier in the lottery that he would have just packed it up and gone overseas and played in Italy, and that was sort of their leverage. And he was probably one of the few guys at the time, having spent time in Italy, spoke the language that maybe that's a credible threat. But you always wonder about how much of that stuff kind of actually goes on behind the scenes, how much politicking there is.
A lot of politics. A lot of politics, especially now with the game, being so global and being so big. I mean, you have some other opportunities to kind of pull your trump card, kind of give an idea that you have other options because the game is so big now. But yeah, you have to play the game as well. I mean, players have to also play the game into politics and to make sure that they feel that they're getting or being placed in the best spot as possible. Are they always right? Are we always right? Not necessarily, but I mean, you do enough homework, you do enough research, and you have your wants and you have your needs, and that's kind of what you go by until somebody says different or makes you do something different.
I think it's probably a little more widely known at this point, like who the good front offices are and things like that. I think fans have an idea of that, and maybe they didn't, in the 90s and stuff like that because internet and the way things are now. But do you just have to rely on your agent to kind of give you good feedback on like who runs a good organization the right way? Obviously, you know how good the team is, but you don't really probably get to see the behind the scenes things, like an agent does.
Yeah, I think it does rely on the agent, and because it's the game is built on relationships, and general managers that become agents that have transitioned into different roles, managers that have transitioned into agents and also into front office roles. So for me, it's about relationships. So making sure that whoever your agent is, you have enough understanding and have enough of a relationship with your agent that you can rely on them to pull the right cards. Every agent is not going to pull every resource that they have because it's a funnel. I mean, they don't want to mess up a resource and you're not doing exactly what you're supposed to do because the next person comes around. The resource is not going to look out for them. So it is important to have a good agent that's in the game, right? That's been in the game, that's been around for a while. I had David Falk and Jeff Wexler, which were two guys that staples within the game. Everybody knows them within all the organizations. So you're going to get the best information possible because you're working with those guys. And if you have the mutual respect, then they'll make sure that you're taken care of in that manner. So Jeff Wexler, who is my agent throughout my career, I mean, he's really still my agent. I mean, he doesn't have to do much, but when I talk to people and, that's my agent, that's not my old agent. That's my agent. He's a good friend of mine. So those are the sort of relationships that you can't give away. You can't hold those for granted because everybody is not like the guys that I had, with me.
How did you end up with those guys? Was it a couple of people you tried out or interviewed first, or you just kind of got lucky on the first try there?
Well, we interviewed a few agents, I Bleav. Actually, I had a small team around me, but people that I trusted, and they actually took the first 5 or so interviews, and the last 2 were my interviews to take and to figure out who I liked between the 2. Mm-hmm. And those guys, David started with me, and then Jeff was quickly put into place because he was taking a larger role. So David was my agent, but I looked to Jeff more so as that primary role.
So we talked about your draft and how deep a class was it? Were there any guys from that draft that you were kind of surprised that didn't end up, having the career that some of these other guys did? Like, was there one particular name of people where it was like, oh, everybody kind of thought that was the dude, like a Shamond Williams or somebody that had a big college career? Is there anyone that comes to mind?
Not necessarily. I mean, you just look at that number 1 spot and Olakende having that, that number 1 spot, and how there's a lot of young guys over in place. A lot of the blue blood schools where Arizona was up there, North Carolina with Twan and Vince. So we had a bunch of really good programs and really good players, in place. And for Olakende to get that number 1 spot, I mean, we were chasing that, that number 1 spot. It's like, okay, is Mike Bibby going to get it? Is Vince going to get it? I mean, we just don't know how it's going to play out. But for his situation not to work out, I'm sure how he planned on it to work out is somewhat, of something that I kind of look back on and say, hey, even though you go number 1, or even though you're the top guy, that's not necessarily where you're going to end up. And that's not necessarily the end all be all. So he's probably a guy that I look at as like, he did go number 1, but there are a lot of guys that, went late first round, early second round that had some great careers. And it didn't matter if they went, 1 or if they went 45, they had a good career.
I'm assuming you probably never played against Olakende in college. So had you seen much of him prior to the draft, or was he kind of a lesser known guy to the rest of the pool?
It was lesser for me. I didn't know much about him. Again, being in the Midwest, playing at St. Louis University, didn't know much about him until really we started late late in the draft process. I wouldn't even say early on, as far as when we started doing the workouts, it wasn't really on my radar. But I guess it just so happens that as someone else is going through their track and they're getting more eyeballs on them, then their status raises as well. So it was kind of like, boom, it's a shock. He's there, and it's probably going to go, in that spot.
Just sticking with the draft here a little bit. One of your former teammates, Kwame Brown, was another guy that, he was a name as a high school player, but he probably wasn't the name until late in that process. You heard like Eddie Curry and people like that probably a little more often. How come a guy like Kwame that has like the tools that people see that kind of get that attention, how come a guy like that doesn't end up working out? Is it just opportunity, bad luck? Like what kind of leads to things like that in your opinion?
I think it's opportunity, and you're still basing everything on a big P word, potential, and what can he bring to the table, or what will he kind of transition it into, what sort of player he'll become. So it's really about potential.
Okay, folks, that's another episode of the Bleav in Wizards podcast. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and let us, find us on social media. We're at Bleav in Wizards on Twitter, BLEAV in Wizards, and just let us know if you have any questions or stuff you want us to talk about. Otherwise, I'm Matt, and he's Larry, and we'll check you guys next week.